Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right in because today we're taking a truly fascinating journey into one of the most famous and, honestly, probably one of the most misunderstood stories of the ancient world. We're going to move way beyond that typical fire and brimstone Sunday school story you might have heard. Instead, we're going to uncover the deep historical, theological, and even psychological layers of Genesis 19. Yep, we're talking about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay, let's dive into this, because I really want to challenge what you might think you already know. When you hear the name Sodom, a very specific image or maybe a very specific sin probably pops into your head, right? But what if I told you that across different religious traditions and historical texts, the true sin that doomed this ancient city is a lot more complex, and in many ways, just a whole lot more terrifying?
To get to the bottom of this, here's our roadmap for the Explainer. We'll be looking at the terrifying night at Sodom, the true sin, Lot's decision, the pillar of salt, and finally, the consequences of tragedy. Section 1. The terrifying night at Sodom, a city's dark demand. Let's set the scene chronologically. According to Genesis 19, two messengers, angels, arrive at the city of Sodom in the evening. Lot, who is a foreigner settled there, sees them at the city gates. Now, in the ancient Near East, hospitality to travelers wasn't just a nicety, it was literally a matter of life and death. So Lot insists, almost desperately, that these strangers come to his house for protection and a meal. But, well, the peace doesn't last long. As they settle in for the night, a genuinely horrifying scene unfolds. The entire male population of the city, and the text actually goes out of its way to emphasize this, from young to old, all the people from every quarter, surrounds Lot's home. This mob bangs on the door with a terrifying demand. They want Lot to surrender his guests so the crowd can know them, presenting this immediate, incredibly violent physical threat to these strangers. The situation at the door escalates right to the brink of a massive home invasion. As the mob lunges forward to break down the door, the messengers pull Lot back inside and strike the crowd with blindness. Unable to find the door, the mob is finally neutralized. And then, the messengers turn to Lot with an urgent, chilling warning. Gather your family and flee to the mountains right now, because this city is about to be completely wiped out. Section 2. The true sin. Peeling back the theological layers. Let's move to the next part and see how this builds, because this is where the historical interpretation gets incredibly fascinating. I mean, what exactly was the sin that brought about this level of absolute destruction? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how different major traditions interpret the exact same biblical text. Early Christian interpretations heavily emphasize sexual immorality. The Islamic tradition, found in the Quran, points to fahisha, or abominable acts of lust, alongside highway robbery and grave injustice. Meanwhile, rabbinic texts focus super intensely on economic selfishness and cruelty to the poor. And modern scholars? Well, they often synthesize these by viewing the mob's actions as a horrifying display of violent xenophobia and territorial dominance. If we look for hard textual evidence right within the Bible itself to explain the city's downfall, the prophet Ezekiel gives us a pretty striking answer. Notice he doesn't mention the mob at the door at all. Instead, he anchors Sodom's destruction directly in profound social injustice and economic apathy. They were arrogant, overfed, and totally unconcerned with the vulnerable. The rabbinic midrash and Talmudic context bring this economic cruelty to life with some truly dark details. They describe Sodom as a fabulously wealthy but sickeningly selfish society that actually created anti-charity laws. Think about that. Their cultural motto was literally, what is mine, and what is yours is yours. The texts tell these horrific stories of beds designed to physically stretch or amputate travelers who didn't fit perfectly. In one famous account, a young woman was burned alive simply for giving a piece of bread to a starving person. So when we combine these historical and modern perspectives, we start to see that the physical threat at Lot's door was really a symptom of a completely broken moral compass. The demand of the mob wasn't just about simple lust, it was an act of violent humiliation. It was a weapon used to terrorize and assert dominance over foreigners. This was a society that had institutionalized extreme xenophobia. Section 3. Lot's decision, the impossible choice. This brings us to the next major narrative beat, and arguably one of the absolute most unsettling moments in the entire text. As Lot stands at his front door facing this violent mob, he makes an impossible, horrifying moral compromise. To protect the strangers under his roof, Lot actually offers his two virgin betrothed daughters to the bloodthirsty crowd, telling them to do with the women as they please. It's a moment that deeply shocks our modern sensibilities, and rightly so.
He is willing to sacrifice his own children just to appease the mob.
And this brilliantly illustrates a terrifying reality of the ancient world. On one hand, you have the ancient guest right. Protecting travelers under your roof was a sacred, absolutely non-negotiable duty for nomadic cultures. But on the other hand, you have a society where women were severely devalued, often treated as literal disposable property. Lot's decision trades one horrific evil for another, showing us just how deeply flawed and desperate this whole situation was.
Section 4. The Pillar of Salt, the Psychology of Looking Back. So the messengers pull Lot back, save the daughters, and the family flees as fire and sulfur rain down on the city. But during this escape, we encounter a moment of profound, somber tragedy, the fate of Lot's wife.
The text tells us she looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. While this is traditionally viewed purely as a divine punishment for disobedience, theologians and scholars also see this as a powerful psychological metaphor. It's the ultimate picture of regret. It's that paralyzing state of being stuck between the burning ashes of a past you can't return to and an uncertain future you are just too afraid to walk toward.
When we really tap into the deep empathy of her situation, her pause makes devastating sense. She had just been forced to abandon her home. The text implies she left behind older, married daughters in a city she knew was literally turning to ash. And she was fleeing into the wilderness alongside a husband who just hours earlier had offered her youngest daughters to a violent mob. Her heart must have been absolutely shattered. To ground this ancient myth in physical reality, if you actually visit the area of Mount Sodom today, you'll see striking, towering salt formations exactly like these ones. For millennia, locals and travelers have pointed to these specific natural monuments and called them Lot's wife.
So she didn't just die in the story, she froze in time. She became a permanent fixture in this barren, striking landscape of the Dead Sea. She becomes a physical monument to the complete inability to let go. So the crucial point is captured beautifully in this reflection from our sources. She is a statue, yes, but of salt. And salt provides flavor and preservation. Even in her tragic pause, her story offers a timeless lesson, giving flavor and profound meaning to everyone who stops to study her story today. She teaches us the deadly cost of clinging to a broken past. Section 5. The Consequences of Tragedy, the Dark Aftermath. Now, the story doesn't end with the destruction of the city. We have to move to the final, unsettling chapter of this narrative to see what happens to the survivors when society's moral framework completely, utterly collapses around them. Lot and his two remaining daughters eventually flee the small town of Zoar and hide in a mountain cave. The trauma is absolute. The daughters, isolated and terrified, believe that the whole world has been destroyed and that they are the very last people left on Earth. And in this utter despair, they devise a desperate plan. Believing humanity is facing extinction, they decide to intoxicate their father over 2 nights in order to sleep with him and preserve their family lineage. It's a grim, deeply disturbing survival tactic. From this incestuous union, the text tells us, come the Moabites and the Ammonites. This dark aftermath underscores the absolute devastation of trauma. It shows us that the breakdown of moral order in Sodom ultimately followed Lot's family right into that cave.
We've seen how the text maps out systemic cruelty, impossible moral choices, and the lasting scars of trauma. But the image that lingers most, it's the pillar of salt. It forces us to look at our own lives. Are you holding on to something that is already gone? Are you letting the ashes of the past block you from stepping into your own future? It's a profound psychological lesson hidden in ancient history. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive in today's Explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.